Hi, Jonathan. Welcome to our podcast and thank you for joining us. Everybody, this is Johnathan Headland, who is the Urban Design Director of Oxford-based WWA Studios. Jonathan, thank you for joining us very much. If you would like to introduce yourself to our audience, please, and let everybody know about who you are and the practice and the work you're involved in. Please.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Nick. Happy to be here. So a little about WWA. We are a multidisciplinary practice. We work across architecture, urban design and town planning. And I think for our size, we're kind of in an anomaly zone, really, in that that multidisciplinary offer now, especially by virtue of what's been going on with practice acquisition in the last 5-10 years, means that, that sort of 20 to 50 type studio side it is quite small compared to other people who offer the same level of service offering. So it puts us in a position where kind of project typology we're working on can really benefit from that joined up approach between town planning, the very invasive nature of town planning now in relation to site feasibility all the way through progression in the planning system and how slow that can be, the sort of macro focused design and building relationship type master planning work.
Yeah.
Brings to bear, as well as the sort of, real acute attention to detail that you get at sort of stage 3, 4, 5, 6 stages from a conventional architecture practice offering. So we've got an office studio based in Abingdon in Oxfordshire. We've also got a studio in West London, in Hampton. We've, again, another sort of anomaly, if you like, of the practice is that we, through partnerships, can trace our continuous operation back all the way back to 1885 in Abingdon. So through the West family, which is the first W for the WWA, through to Philip Waddy, managing partner previously, but now chairman of the practice, who's been practicing architecture for nearly 40 years, and then through the current MD, Mark Slater, who's based out of our London office, effectively the Arcadia element. The type of project work we get involved in really has a strong residential component, be it across all kind of tenure types. We do a lot of sheltered housing, supported housing for people with additional needs, as well as extra care facilities and care homes. We get involved in a lot of affordable housing provisioning. We're working on a number of sites in relation to pre-developed land, brownfield regeneration sites and things of that nature, as well as sort of further education and higher education campuses and individual building interventions. A project we're working on at the moment in Abingdon. It's quite nice to have a project where you're actually based, which is unusual for us.
Yes, unusual for most practices, to be fair.
Yeah, quite. It is the Unicorn School, which is a specialist school for students with dyspraxia, dyslexia, and other form of learning difficulties or additional learning needs for another campus for them. They've sort of outgrown by virtue of that provisioning.
A completely new build.
Well, no, it isn't. So we have got another element of work that we really major on by virtue of our context in Oxfordshire, is conservation and heritage buildings and listed buildings, and it's the conversion of a former Premier Inn and Beefeater pub site. We moved up the road to a new purpose-built light gauge steel frame building on the A34 interchange, and we're repurposing that. And repurposing something that was really not designed to be repurposed. It's one of those 1980s type purpose-built hotel accommodation was the first phase, and we're turning that into principal teaching spaces. And it's had its challenges. It's very interesting.
How far through this project are you now then?
So we were appointed to advise on the school's acquisition. We're partnering with the school on a number of other projects over the years. We're appointed by them at their very early stage when they're talking about potentially, has this got legs? And that's when we like to get involved, really, because we can make a big difference and advise people on, courses of action that may or may not be preferable. And from our review of this, it's got constraints, but it's well primed for another commercial use or another institutional use. So we advised them on that. We then delivered the listed building and change of use planning permission. We discharged with applications. We tendered all the works, came up with the procurement strategy, and now we've been novated to the contractor, and that's just about to go on site. So this time next month it'll be on site in terms of implementation.
Interesting project, yeah. And again, obviously, as we've spoken to previously, let's get that shared with our audience, which would be brilliant, and get it across. So that's an interesting project that other practices and other people would love to see and read about. So yes, and send that over. So with regard to yourself, then you're the urban design director.
Yes.
How long have you been with WWA then, and what's your history?
Yeah, so I've been with practice just over six and a half years now. I came from a developer background, a bit unusually. So I did my part one undergraduate degree, and then graduated during the 08-09 recession, and I needed a job really. So I managed to get a place on a graduate management scheme for one of the big house builders. And worked there and absolutely loved it, and got involved in a lot of really unusual master plan progression stuff. The southern region, as it was, obviously developers changed structure and stuff, but as it was then, had a southern region focus in terms of master planning, managed by the separate technical director, and really got involved in sort of all of the considerations in that sort of stage 2-3 review of site constraints and issues and options, and turning a site in terms of getting a design compliant or a good quality design that still ticked the boxes from a viability perspective. Really cut my teeth in that environment, and then I left there in 2018 and joined as a designer at West Waddy, as it was then. And sort of worked my way up there. I became associate in 2020, unusual year, as it turned out to be in the end. I didn't see that coming. And then I became an equity shareholder in 2022. So I've been doing it for a couple of years now.
Is that when it rebranded to WWA?
Yes. So it was a merger between two businesses controlled by the same equity ownership but run separately. And then after the pandemic, we had some continuity planning to do in terms of retirement, people's exiting from the business, and it naturally evolved that we merged the businesses, and we effectively are offering the same services in each patch now as a way of naturally growing the business.
How many staff are you now then, do you think, across the two offices roughly?
Just over 20. We are about 22 in total now across both offices. So it's good size, but it's that unusual size that I think we're seeing less and less of now. You have smaller practices of say up to 10, and then you've got big regional outreach practices of multiple people. That sort of lower middle tier, if you like, of 20 to 50, as really borne out by the REBA benchmarking exercise. It's withering away really, because it's quite a difficult space to operate in.
So do you, based on that then, you mentioned obviously you're in London and where you are now in Oxford. You mentioned this project being A34 quite local to you. Do you actually work all across the country then?
We do.
Projects everywhere, or?
So we work primarily in the south of England. I think if you drew a line from sort of Norfolk down to Bristol, we're in that space, but we're actually seeing now, by virtue of some of our client base operating in that sort of west east Midlands, and actually slightly further north of that, we're being brought into projects by virtue of relationships we've got with those clients and moving into that space. And I think that's obviously an area we've got an aspiration to grow into, but primarily we're focused sort of south of that line, if you like, around the M25, and then in that space all the way down to the south coast. We've got projects on the south coast, which we can manage and are managing moving forward. But I'd say generally, probably about an hour and a half radius from each office is our sort of core areas. In Oxfordshire, that's a really good base because you can get to quite a lot of the centre of the country within an hour and a half from.
Yes, you can. Yeah. Well, it's interesting, as you say, about how other work comes from around the country, just from relationships you've built. I hear that from a lot of practices now. I've been working with practices and helping them market themselves and so on and so forth for well over 25 years now, and it's things have changed in that period of time. You mentioned 2008 when you qualified, the recession. That was a dreadful. I know it was a year you started out, but I'd already been going for 10 years by then. Yeah. That was a particularly tough time, wasn't it? So, but you were with a house builder, you mentioned, was that right?
I was, yeah. So yeah,
that must have been really.
I remember the sort of graduation speech you get when you when you leave university. It's a real sort of shot in the arm normally, or that's what you think of, isn't it?
Thanks and good luck.
The chat we had was basically that. Yeah, it was. It's never been worse than this. And actually, it was sort of half an hour on that, and afterwards, like, oh, great, well, that's there you go. But what I'm finding now, actually, getting into running your own business, is that successfully getting through these economic, and we've had a succession of them really from Brexit onwards. These sort of waves have gone through the economy. Almost badges of honor now. You think, oh, I remember seeing this, and things work in cycles. Then it's a bit of a cliche, but they definitely do work in cycles. And having someone like Philip on the team who's been through his share of recessions and economic blips and things like that is really helpful. And something we certainly wouldn't have between the sort of other director team, which are, we're all of a similar age actually, which I think is another probably cycle thing that happens with these things, isn't it? But,
well, being the size of 22 strong as well, you're perfectly positioned across two offices now to be kind of small enough to still have the small office size practice behind you, as well as being able to offer the bigger projects that we've already alluded to. It sounds like you're in a really good pace moving forward, which is brilliant.
It's exciting because we can still maintain that level of exposure and interest to more junior staff as they come through the progression of qualifying as architects, and get on and learn the ropes through doing. We're moving away from smaller scale domestic work now, but we still have projects for large clients which are of smaller sort of individual packages, and there's nothing like that for getting that real world experience with administering contracts, expecting works on site, which I think sometimes is difficult to, that sort of historic notion of a well-rounded architect who can work across all the stages is kind of falling away by virtue of more and more specialisation. And I completely get why that is, because the system is complicated, getting more complicated.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But having an appreciation, if not specialisation, in a more broader base, I think is so important for your approach to things more generally, which is a real shame. I think it's a symptom of the market not working that well, really. But it's something we really strive to continue to offer, because I think it pays dividends in the longer term. Definitely pays dividends in the longer term.
Well, with planning the way it is as well, and I'm talking to practices all around the country in different, not planning policies, but planning timescales, if you like. If you have a diverse range of portfolio, then you can spread yourself thinly across with different planning issues that may arise. And I do hear this so much about, I don't know, even the smallest 3-bedroom semi that's just asking for a side extension taking 18 months to come through, which is ridiculous, isn't it? And right through to the big projects that we've spoken about, it's we won't go into the planning policies and everybody saying it's being broken and all the rest of it. You hear so many things on LinkedIn and different social medias, but from your point of view, working on different projects of different sizes around the UK, I presume that helps you slightly, doesn't it?
It does, because I think we've all been in a situation where you've got your eggs in one basket, and I guess we've kind of seen that really in terms of PLC house builders. When we were looking at the current iteration of MPPF and its sort of negative implications in relation to housing land supply, that has an impact. If you are a house builder, you're effectively investing money to generate return for your shareholders. It happens to be in house building, but it is an economic exchange. If the hallmarks are not good, it's naturally going to lessen the impetus to invest in that sector. And I think we're starting to see that now. In the most recent completion data that's come out last month, I think it was, is showing a downward trend in relation to completions. And I think that is in the context of a housing crisis. I know become a bit blasé, that term now. It's sort of losing its potency, but it doesn't take a thorough review of data to show so it can be nothing more than a crisis. That's the only apt name for it, because every single metric is going the wrong way in terms of secure, good quality, energy efficient housing stock in this country. Which is, that's the interesting bit from my perspective, at least in relation to planning. It's a means to an end, effectively, but the new government, still a new-ish government, I suppose, that we've got now, really does have an opportunity to pull those levers. I know we've waited, along with our clients, with a bit of bated breath. The sort of warnings we've been given for the autumn statement at the end of the month have all been very much, this is going to hurt, this is negative, it's going to be, may not be the medicine you want to hear, kind of thing. And we've really waited with that bated breath in terms of, there's clearly going to be a view to raising receipts to then invest in other things. I know the investment conference is happening today, isn't it?
Yes. So
where that trade-off is going to, the positive element of that trade-off is going to manifest is going to be really interesting to see.
But, as we mentioned earlier, we've been through 2008, 2020, other things beforehand, 1992, I think it was, with Maggie Thatcher, which was before your time. But it was all these things sort themselves out in the end, don't they, to some degree or other. And I'm sure all will be well. But he says. But well, look, it's been really good you coming on and talking about the practice, the work that you do, and the interesting projects you have. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with our audience, future work or anything at all that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, not that I can think off the top of my head. I think the sort of projects that we like to, because some of the nature of the project we're working on mean that we're unable to show that much detail until it becomes open knowledge. But the stuff that I would like to share, obviously, is to give you a bit of a background in relation to recently completed projects that we've been working on, or ones that have got to a relevant stage. We've just got a bit of a landmark rural commercial development scheme through in Bucks, which we're really happy about, because it had significant planning issues, and we managed to get there was a QC opinion on that, which painted it very negatively in terms of its likelihood of gaining a consent. We disagreed with the fundamentals of the advice, I guess, and put together a planning strategy, which we were able to leverage and actually get this consent through. And there are a few things like that which I think really paint a picture of the kind of different approach we can take to things sometimes in terms of unlocking a difficult site, which I think is something we pride ourselves on doing.
Well, absolutely. It's and like I say, that's what helps you stand out from the crowd. That's one, if nothing else, that's one of your USPs, isn't it? So, which is brilliant, because and that's one thing you've already mentioned you should quite rightly be proud of. And as you look to get the youngsters up through the ranks and attract them to you, that's certainly one of your selling points if you need anything, isn't it? Really, that's
well, we certainly hope so. I mean, that's we like the nice easy ones as well by any stretch, but everyone needs a USP, don't they, in terms of what they can bring that's better, quicker, more impressive or whatever for the money that people are spending. We hope that we can come up with strategies to bring these things forward, or equally at least give the advice so that you're in the knowledge of all the information before making a decision on a site. I think that Ockmill site in Abingdon is a good example of were our opinion a bit negative, we would have just advised our client that actually potentially it's not the best one to move forward with, and these are the reasons why. It's lucky that the assessment chimed with their aspirations and we were able to leverage that for them, but it's not always the case.
Johnathan, thank you very much again for sharing your insights, talking to us and our audience about your practice and the wonderful work that you do. And yes, I thank you very much for joining us.
Great. Thank you for having me.